Good morning and good moed. One of the halachos that can get overlooked during these busy days is the fact that we stopped on the first day of Pesach reciting the insert of Mashiv, Haruach, Umorid Hageshem. The Gemara in Tanis talks about the timing of the insertion of Mashiv Haruach, which concludes with the first day of Pesach, and for Ashkenazim it concludes at Musaf, after the Chazan has davened Tfilas Tal in the Chazar Sashatz of Shachris. So the silence from Esher of Musaf is the first time in which we no longer insert Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem. There are differing minhagim between Ashkenazim and Sfardim as to whether we say nothing or add the brief insertion of Morid Hatal. Sfardim add Morid Hatal, but Ashkenazim typically, according to the Ramah, do not recite anything in that slot. Though the Mishnah Berurah points out that the custom in Israel is for even Ashkenazim to add Morid Hatal. The Gemara in Tanis on Daf Gimel Amud Beis quotes Rabbi Chanina, who says that if one said Morid Hageshem in the summer, when one is not supposed to say Morid Hageshem, one must repeat Shemona Esrei if they have concluded it. Rashi explains the reason for this is because rain is significant and important when it's necessary. However, if we have too much rain at the wrong time, then it is actually considered to be a curse, a klala, and not a good thing. And therefore, if one inappropriately daven for Geshem, for rain, then one must in fact repeat Shemona Esrei. What happens how far must one go back if they remember earlier? So the Rush writes that if one said Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem inadvertently, but remembered before the conclusion of that bracha of Mechaye HaMesim, before reciting the Baruch Atah Hashem of Mechaye HaMesim, then they return to the beginning of that bracha. What does it mean, the beginning of that bracha? It specifically means the beginning of the line of Ata Gibor. One should recite that line of Ata Gibor, then continue to Mechalkel Chayim and conclude that bracha. It is not simply enough to go back to Mechalkel Chayim, as the Rav Yah explains, because in doing so, it is not recognizable that he is omitting anything. Because when one is not including Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem, to simply go back to Mechalkel Chayim is not clear that anything is specifically being left out unless you go back earlier to the beginning of that bracha of Ata Gibor, which is the custom. If one concluded that first bracha, but remembered prior to the conclusion of Shemona Esrei, then one still must go back to the beginning of the Shemona Esrei, because the first three brachos are all considered to be one unit. And therefore, again, if one inadvertently includes Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem, then one needs to go back, if they remember before the conclusion of that bracha, to Ata Gibor, and then continue from there. However, if one has already concluded that bracha Mechaye Mesim, or certainly if they've concluded Shemona Esrei, then they must go back to the beginning of Shemona Esrei and repeat it, so that we not daven for the rain when it is inappropriate. In the case of Suffolk, then it as usual, it depends on 30 days. If one is within 30 days, then they assume their previous practice and would have to repeat it. If one is post 30 days, and we assume we've established this new custom, this new way of davening, and would not need to repeat. Have a good moed and a good Yom Tov.